The HR Stories podcast is brought to you by the team at HR Stories. The team at HR Stories helps businesses, nonprofits, and HR practitioners better manage the employee experience, providing the tools, training, and resources needed to get HR right. For more information, check out our website at theteam@hrstories.com. Each week on the HR Stories podcast, HR and leadership experts John Thalheimer and Chuck Simikian dive into the stories that matter most to you, our listeners. We have found that there is a lesson in every story. And now our host, John Thalheimer and Chuck Simikian.
Well, folks, you're back for another episode here, the HR Stories podcast, where there's a lesson in every story. And John and I are just talking about some things in the news. We're also excited because if you go to amazon.com, we want you to search the ultimate guide to HR, checklist edition, ultimate guide to HR. And we are on Amazon now. Our book is an actual book. And that's pretty exciting. You can get the book, you can get a Kindle version. And as always, if you go to Ultimate Guide to HR, you can download a PDF version. There's something for everybody. But speaking of something for everybody, we hope we're hitting the mark with you as our listeners as we talk about a variety of things in HR and stories and HR in the news and opinions. John has some opinions this week. In fact, that's what we were just talking about when I just hit the record button and I said, let's just go. So what do you want to do, John?
Hi, everyone. This is John. I've just been enjoying the last 62 seconds of Chuck going off extra, just going off. And I appreciate that. I was just like, hey, are you going to introduce me? Am I just here? Maybe I'm not showing up on this podcast.
No, he is definitely here.
Earlier podcast this month, you weren't there. So maybe I thought, maybe this is the one that I'm not supposed to be at. Anyway, we were talking about, for those people that live in New Jersey, let's hear it for the Garden State. There is in the legislature there a right to disconnect bill, which basically says that employees should have the right to disconnect when they are not at work. Meaning that the bosses and the supervisors and other employees shouldn't be reaching out to them and they shouldn't feel obligated to answer them. This is a trend worldwide. I don't know, Chuck. It's happening in Australia, I think France, and there's another country which I can't think of. And so what we were talking about, is SHRM wrote a memo on behalf of not the employees' right to disconnect, but the employers saying that, no, that would be too much trouble. We can't do that. We can't implement that. And so I think SHRM is a good organization. They do a lot of wonderful things, but at times I'm a more employee-leaning HR person, and I know that's not always why we're there, but that employee experience and I have another statistics I'm going to share with you in a second, Chuck. That I just think that we should think about what can we do for the employees so they can be more productive at work. So that's kind of where I go.
Yeah, it's I know, and I tell you what, and I kind of heard little snippets of this, but I wasn't as familiar before we started talking. And I just pulled it up and I see Australia passed a right to disconnect legislation. It's been discussed in California. New Jersey is trying to push something through. The right to disconnect bill was defeated in California in May of 2024, but it's making its way through the New Jersey legislature now. I get, it's an interesting dynamic because I do know, the salaried employees, the perception is you're available 24/7. But I certainly don't, in my world, I'll be connected a lot of times. Maybe it's because of the level that I'm at. Maybe it's because I am in a 24/7 type of industry. Before that, I was doing contract consulting, so I always wanted to be available to clients. I get that. I think SHRM's big opposition to this is they feel it's a one size fits all workplace policy. So there are industries out there that are 24/7, and I just wonder how they would work with that.
Well, but if they are 24/7, right, that means they have staff that are there 24/7, right? And so somebody's on first shift, somebody's on second shift, somebody on third shift. And so why are you calling somebody from first shift to deal with a problem on third shift?
Mm-hmm.
Right? And so I get it, right? And so again, I, as an employer, want the freedom. If I need to call an employee, I don't want to be burdened by a law. And how do you enforce it, right? What's the penalty? I get it. There's a lot to go on to it. I think for me, whether there's a law or not, I think there needs to be a conversation about taking a pause before we reach out after hours to
Yes.
contact an employee about something that at work, because we were talking. So I don't know if you guys can tell this, but I'm on the road today, and I was doing a presentation. We were finishing up a leadership program, so this was our fourth day, and the third part of this, the third class, was about team wellness, and so how do we
Right.
create team wellness and that kind of stuff. I didn't actually present that. My co-presenter Candace presented it. She always does a wonderful job. And one of the things they talked about was burnout, right? And so setting those boundaries for yourself. And she was talking about this experience where she was out at dinner on Saturday night with her husband, and her husband's boss was calling her or calling him. Right? And it's sort of like, how important is it on a Saturday night? And this is a marketing company that they respond right away.
Yeah.
And so I just, there needs to be boundaries. We need to change the cultural conversation so it's not completely acceptable to do that. Now, obviously, emergencies come up, right? So, I work 24/7 business as well. And so emergencies are going to come up and you need to respond to them right away. But I think there needs to be that timeout. And so maybe that's
Yeah.
my point of view on that.
And I like that. I mean, I got to tell you, and we'll just to wrap it up from my point of view, I'm HR in a 24/7 operation. Something happens at 8 o'clock, 10 o'clock, 2 in the morning, and employees in an injury. Yeah, I get it. Hey, Chuck, we got an urgent situation, but I never require my employees in all the years that I've been a manager, and to my salaried employees, I've never required them to, hey, be available so I can. Hey, I'm working on this project. Let's set up a time tonight at 8 o'clock at night. I mean, not that, but I do ask my managers to check emails before you go to bed. Just literally just look through your emails real quick, see if there's anything that needs to be acted upon right away. And then after that, if it can wait, it can wait. So I agree. It's a cultural thing. It's a retention thing. It's a recruitment thing. There are maybe some industries that do, and managers that are so type A, they require and set appointments for their employees to meet at 7, 8, 9, several hours after the workday. But I'll be interested to see where this goes, because like you said, and I didn't know this, other countries have already passed this. So I think that's something I'm going to want to read into. And to our listeners, if you'd like to check out our show notes, I'll go ahead and put in there some countries that have these laws. We'll do a little research on the side.
That's great. Yeah, that's fantastic. And it kind of leads me to my next story, Chuck. So I got an email today from my friends over there at the Gallup organization. And the headline is this. Are you ready for this?
I'm ready.
This is depressing mood for any small business owner, anybody in HR. It says this: employee satisfaction has reached a historic low.
Whoa, really?
Yeah. So Back in 2014, it looks like it was about 28%, right? And so again, our employees are probably not very satisfied with their job overall, right? And so kind of putting that in your mind. And it's now down to it looks like 18% are so I'm sorry. So 18% are extremely satisfied. So
Okay. Okay.
in 2014 it was 28% were extremely satisfied. Now it's only 18, and 51% are watching for or actively seeking a new job,
Wow. Wow.
right? Which that surprised me because we went through that during COVID, right? We went through that thing. There was this peak of people are looking, and we went and we did that. It's even higher now than when it was at COVID. In fact, it looks like the last three surveys, so basically the last year, it's been stuck at 51%. But that's a lot when you start thinking about over turnover, poor retention rates, the cost of all that. I think it's something that we need to be paying attention to as HR and start thinking about what can we do internally with our cultures to kind of build that up going on.
Yeah, that's amazing. So, I get it that it's going up. Okay. And I mean, I get it based on what you told me. But what I don't just overall get is from year to year to year, it's been at a certain level and go. In other words, it just seems that if a lot of these folks are continuing to look for jobs, they must have by now found a new job in the last couple of years, yet they seem to be unsatisfied with that job. So every year that level is so high. I don't know what people are so what's the word? Unsatisfied about their
Yeah.
roles on a constant basis.
Well, looking at the graph, like 2001, it's so from 2014 to 2021, it was pretty much even. It was between like 29% were extremely satisfied to about 27%. In 2021, it went and just took a nosedive, and then it started eking back up in 2023, a little bit in the beginning of 2024, but then it went boom, went down. So only 18% are satisfied, and 51% are that's extremely satisfied, and 51% are looking for a new job.
Yeah.
And I think there will always be churn, right? I think there will always be churn. People will always be looking for a job. What worries me more is that such a small percentage is, the smallest percentage is extremely satisfied with their job. And I get it, right? Maybe we're not going to be like, oh, it's the best job ever, right? If I'm doing some stuff. I think you and I are lucky because we love what we do. And so even when we're having bad days, we're like, but I still love it. Um, but I do think, I think in HR, I think leaders as well really need to think about what am I doing to create an environment where people can be productive and engaged and satisfied, even though it may not be the best place to like the best job in the world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I wonder, and this may lead into my story, or not story, but my only thing that I have to share before we get into our main story today
Woohoo! Yeah.
is that incivility in the workplace. So there's this
Right.
thing called the SHRM
Yeah.
Civility Index. It was just launched last May of 2024. And so it's a quarterly pulse survey designed to gauge the levels of civility and incivility in the workplace. And so they just came out with their latest scores, but overall the scores are calculated on a 100-point scale. Okay. From 0 being that incivility never occurs to 100 being that incivility almost always occurs. And this is coming right out of the presidential election, kind of on the heels of that. But this came out just last month, John, in December. And it said on average, U.S. workers scored 49.7% out of 100 on the Civility Index when they were asked about incivility that they personally experienced or witnessed in their everyday lives, both in and out of work over the past month. And, it's the interesting thing here is that 76% of respondents overall indicated they had witnessed acts of incivility over the past month, with 21% of those folks saying, hey, I personally experienced it. So that may be driving some things too, where people just don't like their job because the people are jerks.
Yeah, I mean, who wants to work in a work environment? And I think all of us at some point have been in that work environment that there were jerks around. And I've worked in really great teams, and I've worked in teams that there were some pretty jerky people in those teams, right? And so, yeah, and it could be that, right? Maybe people aren't satisfied because, again, it's a cultural thing, right? And so that allows to go on. There's this definitely a discourse out in the United States about that. One of the things that I've been thinking about, Chuck, and I don't know what your thoughts on this, and I haven't kind of thought about this. I haven't mentioned this to you before, but I am seriously thinking about putting some of my energy and focus in for 2025 and building a workshop around empathy, just around empathy. How do we become more empathetic in our day-to-day work, right? How do we do that? How do we become more empathetic? We know that in terms of leadership, empathy is one of the most important traits for a great leader. And so how do we do that? How do we build that up and get around it? And so this is as far as I've gotten. I've mentioned it to you. I mentioned it to Candace today and a couple other people in the workstation. They're like, yeah, well, you need to do that. Let me know when it's happening. I'll come and I'll attend. And I think it's an important subject.
Yeah, and I will tell you about empathy in the workplace, and then I'll let you, if you have any other stories, so we can get to our main story today. What I have seen, and this may help you in your class, is a true leader understand, and I'm talking like real time people that I've dealt with that have empathy. If something happens to an employee, something personal, an employee has to leave, an employee has to call off, leave early, come in late. Good leaders are like, no problem. We'll figure it out. But what I tend to see is managers that are just irritated. Oh, here we go again. Oh, here we go. Oh, now I got to figure out how to, and they completely lose the empathy, and all they're focused in is the inconvenience they're going to have in the operation. And a good leader's going to be obviously aware of that too, but the empathy comes out. Says, you know what? Yeah. You gotta, oh God, I feel so bad. I understand, rather than, so that's a good difference there. And I've seen it.
Yeah.
So.
Oh no. Yeah. I mean, I can think about myself. And early in my career and my role, somebody would call out and I would be like, oh man, I got to figure out how to deal with this and that kind of stuff. All right, you go off. Don't worry about us. We'll deal with it. Versus what can we do for you? And then not move them on, but have that conversation with them about how can we deal with you? And then come back to the team and go, all right, this is happening. How can we make this happen? What can we do to do that? I learned that lesson. It took time to get there. Kind of taking some of that burden on, going, all right, we'll figure that out. But let me make sure this person's okay. Right. So
rather than getting pissed off and making the employee feel worse than they already do.
Yeah.
So
yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
What else? You got anything else before we get to the main event?
Yeah. So I can't wait to get to the main event, but I do want to, let me see if I can find it now. So you know me, I like to snoop around a little bit and look at websites and that kind of stuff. And so, I do a workshop around payroll law, help managers understand payroll law and the importance and that kind of stuff. And so we were talking about the recent decisions around the exemptions for executive administration professional, the final rule, and then the court and all that kind of stuff. So I went to the Department of Labor website, right? And I know we've talked about this 100 times and we've kind of put this down, but I wanted to see what they were saying exactly about this ruling, right? And so here's what they said, and I want you to notice something in here that I just want you to pay attention to something. So,
Okay.
So they talk about it, blah, 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 and then they say on November 15th, 2024, the U.S. District Court for the Eastern District of Texas vacated the department's final rule. Consequently, with regard to enforcement, the department is applying the 2019 rule minimum salary level of $684 per week in a total annual compensation requirement for highly compensated employees at $107,432. Now, it continues and says lawsuits regarding the 2025 rule are currently pending in 2 other federal district courts, right? And so we know that the different federal courts are different. Some are more conservative, some are more liberal. So we'll see where that goes, meaning that there's probably a chance that'll end up in the Supreme Court. And the United States, and this is what caught my attention, and the United States has filed a notice of appeal from the November 15th decision.
Yeah.
So it sounds like they're going to appeal it, which when last time you and I talked and the people we've been talking to, no one's mentioned that to me before. I haven't seen it in the news and that kind of stuff. And I'm like, it's right there on their website, folks. Now, we do know that the Trump administration is coming in. They are much more employer friendly.
They're in right now as we record.
Oh yeah, right. They're on the release date. Yeah. And so I think we just need to be aware of that, and we'll see what happens. Again, something to be paying attention to for sure as we go forward. So, man, there's a lot of stuff happening in the beginning of the year. One of the things I'll mention, then we need to get to our break before Sam yells at us. Sorry, Sam. Have to understand what were the laws in your state that came in that are going to impact employment laws. Right. And so there's a lot of 2025 employment laws and getting that stuff up. And the best resource I found is an employment lawyer conglomerate called, I think it's Litter. Is that right? Littler.
Sorry.
Littler, yeah.
Littler, yes.
And so they always, every year, they do a great job of saying, hey, here's the laws that we've been following. They go in place and they have it by state. So I would definitely check that out. And if we can, Chuck, if we can put that into the notes, that would be fantastic. And I'll see if I can send that to you. I have it somewhere. So I'll send that link to you and then we can put it in the notes. So all right.
For the main event, John, just before we go into the break, you and I are followers of a guy named Eric Meyer, the Employer's Handbook. He's an attorney. He does a newsletter, comes out fairly regularly every day, sometimes every other day or so. And he threw out a newsletter a couple of weeks ago that just kind of caught my eye. So shout out to Eric, and we'll mention him again. But he threw something out, a recent court case, and he broke it down. I really liked it. So I did a little more research, and I thought, okay, there's a good story here for the HR Stories podcast, where there's a lesson in every story. And we're going to be deep diving into that right after this message. You know, John, I just love answering our listener questions. And it just reminds me that no matter what you do, we always talk about systems and having the right systems in place. So Bamboo HR is an HR system. And it's one that if you are out there, folks, and you're wondering, hey, we need a new system, or maybe we're not big enough for a system, you really want to check out Bamboo HR. One of the things about Bamboo HR, as I have come to experience it is super easy. It's easy to use, it's easy to learn, easy to implement, and it is easy to love. There are clean interfaces, it's colorful, it's extremely user-friendly. If you get a chance, why don't you go ahead and check out a free demo of Bamboo HR. The team at HR Stories is endorsing Bamboo HR, and we would invite you to go to bamboohr.com/free free demo. That's bamboohr.com/free demo and get back to what you actually love to do in HR.
Welcome back to the HR Stories podcast, where there's a lesson in every story. Thank you, listeners, for being here. We really do appreciate it. This is going to be a great year, 2025. We're going to be introducing some on-air guests. We've decided that you guys are tired of Chuck and I just chatting. We have some really good guests lined up, so we're going to bring that to you as soon as we get that going. Don't forget the Ultimate Guide to HR Checklist Edition. That book is out on Amazon now, so definitely check that out. Also, we're going to be doing some workshops, on-demand workshops. So if there's a topic that you want us to discuss or something that you want us to handle, let us know, and we will get to that on there as well. We got some really good ones on our website already. It's the team at HR Stories. Go check that out. Make sure you're downloading those and getting to those as well. Chuck, I'm really fascinated by this story. Obviously, you shared beforehand what the story was going to be and the details, but I can't wait to kind of go down through this and break it down because it really does change some of my thinking about employment law and how do we think about it. And so this is kind of I don't want to say a game changer, I don't think, but I do think it's something that we need to be paying attention to, and our HR folks and employers really need to be paying attention to.
Yeah, and it's in the ever evolving and changing world of remote work. And I think this is a game changer. Now, granted, this is out of New Jersey, but as you and I know, case law, people study these things and then they make decisions based on laws that happen around the country. But I think this is a pretty tight case in regards to the outcome and why the decisions were made. So once again, folks, welcome back to the HR Stories podcast, a lesson in every story. So this deep dive into remote work, where John and I have taught classes on how to manage remote employees. And, he and I have talked constantly about the changes in dealing with and working with remote employees. And different states have different employment laws. And John, this case has a surprising legal twist that really caught a lot of people off guard.
Oh, no. Yeah. So Chuck, let me guess. Someone thought the laws of their home states applied, but it didn't work out that way, maybe.
Exactly. So this is about a person named Inna. I don't know if it's Inna or Ina. I-N-N-A.
I think it's Inna.
Inna. Inna Karchenko. Yeah, Kartchenko. We'll have that in the show notes too. Inna Karchenko. And she worked remotely from her home in New Jersey, but was employed by a Pennsylvania-based healthcare group. And that's not totally unheard of, right? A lot of the folks that work in that closed Northeast area, the Boston, New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Virginia, they do live and work in other states. But with Ina, after a dispute involving harassment and discrimination complaints, so obviously there's always more, right? There's always more. Right, it's not just a simple thing. After a number of complaints back and forth, she was terminated. And so she decided to sue under New Jersey's very employee-friendly laws. Employee-friendly laws, not employer.
Well, I mean, to me, that makes sense, right? Because if I'm, again, right, and sometimes I think we present like Ina went out there and she sued, right? She reached out to the lawyers and said, and the lawyers were like, oh, let's do this in New Jersey, right? Because she worked in New Jersey and they're the friendly ones there. And so we want to go after them because we think we can win there. So why wouldn't she work there, right? She worked in New Jersey remotely. So why wouldn't New Jersey laws apply?
So, you would think New Jersey's laws would apply, and that's what Ina thought too. But here's the kicker. The court said, right, she works and lives in New Jersey, works for a Pennsylvania company. The court said in the end, Pennsylvania law applied because that's where her employment was base. Boom. Okay, this case highlights a critical issue for HR professionals that are managing remote employees. And that basic principle is, where does employment law actually apply?
Yeah, I think it's a great question, and again, as I said earlier, on the top of the after the break, I'm fascinated to see how this goes, and really try to understand like what should I be doing and how should I be applying this, because I think it's really important. And again, I know this is one case and it's not going to have the same coverage all over the United States, but it is a good thing to kind of start thinking about, and maybe how I am maybe looking at from a HR point of view, how we're writing our remote policies.
Right. And it's not cut and dry as you and I had kind of thought it was. And in a way, it was a little more, we thought it was a little more succinct. So now it gives us that favorite HR answer. It depends, right? So Ina, yeah. And I know you love that answer. I'm in HR. It depends. So Ina Karchenko, she was hired back in 2007 to work for the American Oncological Hospital, part of the Fox Chase Cancer Center in Pennsylvania. And she worked on site.
They are a really good hospital. Not to interrupt you, but they're a really good hospital.
Are they really? Okay. Not heard of them.
Great hospital, great organization.
Excellent. So she worked for them, and she worked on site for 6 years before moving to a hybrid schedule in 2013, eventually going fully remote during COVID-19, then working entirely from her home in New Jersey.
Yeah, and I think that happened a lot, right? And I have a friend that his company's in Delaware, but like he lives across the river, Delaware River, and so he commutes. So he works now in New Jersey in his home, but comes in occasionally into the office, right? And they call him in for things like that, but he was working in New Jersey. So I think that, again, a lot of companies stayed remote. They're like, well, you can be remote. You're getting your job done. It's fine. So what's happening kind of now, Chuck?
Yeah. So fast forward to early 2023, Ina reported her supervisor for harassment and discrimination to HR. I don't know what those actual charges were or claims were, but around the same time, her manager was named Sanjita Cook. Her manager, Sanjita Cook, implemented stricter return to office requirements, despite Ina previously having approval to work remotely.
So just to clarify, the boss, right, the manager, put in new return to office requirements. So did that mean that Ina's was revoked? Like, was that pulled in? And my other question is here, was that just for her or was it for the whole team?
Yeah. So it was not revoked, at least not entirely. But Cook, her manager, forced her to return to the Pennsylvania office 3 days a week. Only 3 days a week, which was a major shift for Ina after working successfully from home for years. And then a few months later, Ina is terminated, and she believed the firing was retaliatory. So she filed a lawsuit under New Jersey's whistleblower law, CEPA, and the state's law against discrimination, which is NJ New Jersey LAD.
Right. Yeah. So New Jersey law against discrimination, right? So makes sense. New Jersey laws are known to favor employees, right? When we think, and I just want to clarify this for everyone, right? And so across the United States, some states tend to give employees more rights than other states. And we know that when we can everyone talks about California, New York, New Jersey, maybe Connecticut. But it's good to be aware of where your state is situated, I think, in terms of that there. But here's the kicker for me, Chuck. I am always surprised occasionally when what I think is a more employer friendly state has like one or two like employee friendly things. And I'm like, oh, I would not have expected of that. And so just being aware of your state laws are on there. So sorry, Chuck, I didn't mean to
Oh,
interrupt
that's
you, but
okay. No,
yeah, yeah.
that's great stuff. See, Enid chose New Jersey, it might make sense because they are more employee friendly. But here's the legal twist. We're going to twist it up a little bit. And it comes in where the court in New Jersey ruled that Pennsylvania law applied, not New Jersey.
So basically, they said, we don't want to deal with this. You got to go to Pennsylvania and deal with it over there. So why would it be Pennsylvania law? She's working in New Jersey. Why would it be Pennsylvania law?
Yeah. And the courts in New Jersey, by the way, as I read into this, and I read some of the briefings, they didn't just automatically say this. I mean, the lawyers for the company successfully argued this. New Jersey didn't just like come up with this. So the opposing lawyers argued for this. And so the great question here is the court used what's called the state of employment test. And this is where things kind of get interesting. And once again, I want to give a shout out to employment lawyer Eric Meyer with the employer handbook. You can Google him. He's out there. I might tag him in our LinkedIn post on this because I do want to thank him for that. But he explained this beautifully in his blog a few weeks ago. You see, the courts look at several key factors to decide which state laws apply. And so in this case, the first factor was where the work is based. So in Ina's case, her employment was tied to Pennsylvania. She lived and worked in New Jersey, but everything she did was tied to Pennsylvania. She was hired, promoted, and directed from Pennsylvania. So that's number one.
Okay. Yeah.
Number two, the employer's location. So while Ina worked remotely in New Jersey, her employer operated out of Pennsylvania, which we've kind of already covered. But the next two actually, I think, kind of seal the deal. So number three is called remote work for convenience. The court noted that Ina's remote work was approved for her convenience, not because the company required her to work in New Jersey. And the fourth thing kind of ties into that. And the fourth parameter, their factor, is no business conducted in this case, New Jersey. In other words, the company was not doing any business or even targeting New Jersey clients in any significant way.
Yeah, and it's interesting, like listening to that list, right? And I'm just going to go back just to kind of get our listeners and make sure they got it too, right? So number one was, where is the work based, right? And so where is the employer base? Where is the work base? In this case, she was hired and started working for the company for 6 years in Pennsylvania, right? And then was promoted and was directed from Pennsylvania. The employer's location was in Pennsylvania, right? We can do that. Remote work for her convenience. I think that's fascinating. Like, well, isn't remote work really, I mean, couldn't we all argue that remote work is for the convenience of the employee? Although during COVID, it was for the convenience of the employer. So there's something there. And then no business was conducted in New Jersey, meaning that that company was not targeting anybody in New Jersey in terms of clients or business or anything which is there. This sounds very similar when we think about tax law, state tax law, and what taxes we should be taking out from an employee's paycheck.
Yes. And you teaching payroll class, we salute you for delving into those intricacies. So the courts, and I will tell you, not all work, a lot of work remote, maybe for the convenience of the employee. However, if I may say, my wife, still getting used to saying that, my wife,
congratulations.
She's a Southeast rep for a security software company. So she's based in the Southeast, handles Southeast companies. So,
Right.
that, yeah, but anyways, overall, you're right. A lot of employees convenience, but the courts don't automatically apply the laws of the state where you live if the employment itself isn't tied to another state. So that's kind of the bottom line in this court case. And there are some
So,
lessons for employers. God, what do you got?
yeah, so I know you want to go into the lessons for employers, but I do have, and you may, again, I know I'm putting you on the spot. You may not have questions for this. So one of the things that to me, I don't know. I'm not a lawyer, so I don't know this for thing. But she wasn't working completely in New Jersey, right? She wasn't a remote worker in New Jersey. She was working part time in Pennsylvania, right? So she was making that
That is
commute,
true.
working part time. She started it like to me. When I look at it, I'm like, well, of course, Pennsylvania laws apply because she got hired there, she got promoted there. Yeah, she did a little remote work, but then she was pulled back in. But so that's one thing. But the other thing is, did you see this? Did she reach out to the EEOC, or did she decide like I'm not going to go through the federal level, I'm going to go through the state level?
Yeah, I didn't see, but what I did notice, they didn't mention that in any of the legal briefs, but it looks like she filed her lawsuits directly in New Jersey
Yeah,
based on New Jersey laws. So she may not have needed to go through a portal of sorts into the EEOC and let the EEOC rule on this.
yeah.
This was solely based in New Jersey law.
Yeah, so my guess is that her lawyers made the decision to go to New Jersey law because they thought they had a better case than going to the federal law courts.
Yes.
And then, right, and so that's where they went. And that's what lawyers do, right? And they're going to be going, what laws can we win at? Because we want to get money from your company, right? And so again, that's why we need great employment lawyers fighting for us, our employers, because we want to make sure that they know, hey, well, you can do it that way, but this is why this isn't going to work there. So they had some good lawyers at that Fox Chase Cancer Center. All right. So,
Yeah.
Chuck, what are the lessons? What should we think about from this story, right? Because there's always a lesson in every story. So, what's the lesson? What should I be doing to make sure that I'm prepared?
Yeah. So here's the thing. This isn't just about New Jersey. These principles can apply across the country. So HR professionals need to be prepared. Just be prepared. Be aware of this. Here are the big takeaways. And once you know it, there are 3 things. The big takeaways. Who knew? 3 things. Number 1, clarify the state of employment. In job offers and in employment contracts, explicitly state where the employment relationship is based. Don't leave that ambiguous. Number 2, be aware of remote work policies. Just because an employee works remotely doesn't mean the laws of their home state apply. So courts are going to look at where the work is directed and the company's primary location. And number 3, no surprise, John, consult
Right.
legal
Yeah.
experts. We're not lawyers here, but we do interpret many things that lawyers do, and we have fun with it. We tell stories, but multi-state compliance is complicated. It's a deep well, and partner with a legal counsel to ensure you understand how different state laws apply to your remote workplace.
Yeah, and I want to go back a little bit because I don't want people walking away going, well, we're headquartered in Texas and I have people working in California, so I'm going to follow the Texas laws. That is not going to fly. You need to follow the California laws. And again, you need to know, where do I have workers? And again, it's a difference from a remote worker versus somebody that has a physical site in California. But I would be very careful not just to dismiss it and go, oh, well, we're going to follow the laws of Texas because that's where we're based. That's probably not going to do it. This is a very clear case in employment and trying to make sure you're defining that employment relationship. and it's going to be different based on the different types of laws and the way they're written and what your state and what the state where that employee is written. So going back to Chuck's point, I think this is where you consult those legal experts and making sure you get somebody that is knowledgeable in multi-state compliance. Eric and his team could really help you with that. They got a lot of great stuff going on there, but you really want to make sure that you're paying attention to that. So I think for us, right, employers need to set clear expectations and document everything when it comes to remote workers and say, this is the plan. This is what we're going to do. Here's what our expectation is. Also define as you change policies. So maybe you're going to a hybrid policy now. Explain to them like what the clear expectation is when they're at work and when they're not. So I just think there's a lot of clear expectations that need to be documented.
Yeah, John, and I have a client now, one of my few clients that I still maintain. They have business in Florida, only business in Florida. They're a third-party Medicare company, and for years, they have not wanted to hire anyone outside of certain states. They certainly didn't want to hire anyone that worked in California remotely. But this may change all of that in that if someone works in California but their business is only Florida for a Florida company and only towards Florida consumers and Florida residents, there may be case for pause now. So I don't know.
I think because the way California law is written, a lot of it's written is like if you have an employee in here, you need to follow California law. Yeah. And again, and I think it's different. This was a discrimination case, right? And so it was about discrimination in the workplace and all that kind of retaliation. It's going to be different when we think about the Fair Labor Standard Act or overtime or those rules. And so again, complicated. Make sure you're talking to your employment lawyers for sure.
Yeah. And that's kind of the bottom line here. Remote work continues. You can't make those assumptions about state laws. Clarity, compliance are the key. And really, it's all about staying proactive and informed. And I know we've already said a big thanks to Eric Meyer for shedding light on this case. We do love digging into these stories. And John, anything else to add as we wrap up our episode of the week?
No, I think there's a lot of great information. Again, it gives us pause. It gives us something to think about. And just, kind of taking that there. And again, I think one of the things we need to do as small business owners, as leaders, as HR practitioners and professionals, I think we need to make sure that we are staying compliant with the laws and paying attention to it. And I think this is where I think there's this balance of being on your own and then reaching out to an HR consultant, reaching out to an employment lawyer to be like, hey, I'm sitting down. I want to make sure that we're doing this right. This is our policy, right? Before we act, getting people involved to help us.
Yeah. Folks, you've been listening to the HR Stories podcast. There's a lesson in every story. Check out the show notes for some of the things we talked about. You can message us directly. You can send us text messages. You can email us. And as always, make sure you go to team@hrstories.com, team@hrstories.com, or ultimateguide-to-hr.com. That's our new book. Go to Amazon, check it out, search for Ultimate Guide to HR. It is a bestseller. We're very excited about it. Who knew it would take off like this? We always hoped it would, and it is going. So join in, folks, and we'll see you next week.
Thank you for listening to the HR Stories podcast. The material presented in this podcast is for informational purposes only. Chuck and John always recommend using an employment lawyer or HR consultant to handle any legal concerns or HR issues. We do our best to double check sources and make sure the information we are providing is accurate. We may eliminate or embellish without changing the basic narrative to make the story easier to understand. In certain circumstances, we may change identifying information to protect the innocent. The HR Stories broadcast is brought to you by the team at HR Stories. The team at HR Stories is designed to help anyone with HR responsibilities be better at managing the employee experience. To engage with us, go to the hrstoriesteam.com and learn more about how the team at HR Stories can support your business or nonprofit. Thank you for listening to the HR Stories podcast, where there is a lesson in every story.